this time we want to welcome those who are joining us online and to say thank you so much for making us a part of your day. We look forward to having fellowship with you. For those of you who are able to come at other times, we also thank you just for the commitment you make to share this time with us. So may God bless you and encourage you this day. So Mark 8, verse 27. Jesus and his disciples went on to the villages around Caesarea Philippi. On the way he asked them, "Who do people say I am?" They replied, "Some say John the Baptist, others say Elijah, and still others, one of the prophets. But what about you? Who do you say I am?" Peter answered, "You are the Messiah." Jesus warned them not to tell anyone about him. He then began to teach them that the Son of Man must suffer many things and be rejected by the elders, the chief priests, and the teachers of the law, and that he must be killed and after 3 days rise again. He spoke plainly about this, and Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him. But when Jesus turned and looked at his disciples, he rebuked Peter. "Get behind me, Satan," he said. "You do not have in mind the concerns of God, but merely human concerns." Then he called the crowd to him along with his disciples and said, "Whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves and take up their cross and follow me. For whoever wants to save their life will lose it. But whoever loses their life for me and for the gospel will save it. What good is it for someone to gain the whole world, yet forfeit their soul? Or what can anyone give in exchange for their soul? If anyone is ashamed of me and my works in this adulterous and sinful generation, the Son of Man will be ashamed of them when he comes in his Father's glory with the holy angels." And he said to them, "Truly I tell you, some who are standing here will not taste death before they see that the kingdom of God has come with power. This is God's word for us this morning. Let's pray together. Our Father, we thank you that we have this time to worship in peace, to worship and quiet ourselves, to rejoice in your goodness, and also to listen and to learn from your Spirit. Open our spirits, open our minds, that we would learn to think your thoughts and to follow your way. Amen. Perhaps you remember a movie called The Last Temptation of Christ. And if you do, you probably remember it because it was very controversial. It caused a whole lot of uproar. Believe it or not, it was over 30 years ago. It told a very different version of the life of Jesus than the gospel writers give us. I haven't watched the whole movie, but I've seen several clips from it. And it shows a confused preacher and teacher named Jesus struggling to understand what it means to be God's son. The movie caused a lot of protests around the world, like violent protests. A theater in Paris was burned down. Was burned because of showing this film. People who were standing in line just to watch the movie would be assaulted and abused verbally and physically. Other types of protests all around the world. But even before this, in the 1980s, the author of the novel, a Greek author in 1955, when the novel was published, he was excommunicated from the Greek Orthodox Church for writing the book. And so, while I don't agree with the movie's portrayal of Jesus, the idea that Jesus faced other temptations other than in the wilderness after he was baptized is interesting. Because in the movie, Jesus is tempted by Satan, he's tempted by Satan, who appears as this beautiful young girl. She says she's his guardian angel. And she says, you don't need to die. He's on the cross. He's suffering. He said, no, you don't need to die. And the angel helps him down off the cross. Jesus comes off the cross, and he goes, and he eventually gets married, lives a life, has children, and has this normal family, and is ready to die of natural causes. So, obviously very controversial. And yet, it's only a dream. The girl is revealed to be Satan tempting him to not suffer, that you don't really have to die. But Jesus is still on the cross after this dream and vision in his mind. And finally he says, it is accomplished. It is accomplished, and dies. Again, I see the movie as a distortion of the Gospels, but it does raise the issue that Jesus was tempted throughout his life, not just in the wilderness, just as we are tempted almost every day. So last Sunday we looked at the first temptation of Christ in the wilderness after his baptism, and as we continue this journey of following Jesus in Lent, we see another temptation presented to Jesus, this time by one of his own apostles. When Jesus and his apostles were traveling together, the apostle Peter confessed, you are the Christ. And in Matthew says, you are the Christ, the Son of the living God. So you are the Messiah, the one come to save the world. Peter confesses. Then Jesus tells Peter and his followers that as the Messiah, as the Christ, it was necessary for him to suffer many things, to be rejected by religious people, and to suffer, to die, and then to be raised again 3 days later. But as we saw, Peter wants none of this. He cannot accept this. No way. You are the Messiah, the son of David. David was a warrior. David was a king. David was victorious. He always won. Yeah, he may have suffered something, but he was victorious. There's no way God would send the son of David to suffer. And Peter rebukes Jesus. As if Peter knows more about God than God's son. But then Jesus rebukes Peter strongly, and he says, "Get behind me, Satan. You are not thinking about the things God cares about. Instead, you're only thinking about the things people care about." Jesus sees this as another temptation. Get behind me. Stop trying to convince me not to deny myself, take up my cross, and follow my Father. So it is clear that Jesus tells us if we are serious about following him as our Savior, we have to think about the things God cares about. We have to think the way God thinks. But what does that involve? How do we learn to think the way God thinks? Well, if we want to think the way God thinks, we can start by asking the question, what do we think about suffering? What do we think about suffering? Part of the reason Peter was so upset with Jesus is that he just didn't believe that Christ would suffer. As I've already said, he's looking for this conquering hero who's going to come and get rid of the Romans and restore Israel to the nation. We heard in Genesis, this land I'm giving you forever. So he's saying, what are the Romans doing here? Jesus, come back. The Messiah, come back. Put us back in power. Give us back our land. That was the Messiah, the Christ that they were looking for. In Peter's view, and in the view of the other followers, there was no room for suffering, even for a faithful follower of God. Remember in John chapter 9, they're coming to this man who was born blind. And what's the question from the followers of Jesus? Who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? So even in their mindset, suffering had to be sin. Either sin done to you by someone else or sin that you have done. That was their view of suffering. And so it's good for us to ask ourselves, but also necessary for us to ask ourselves, if we want to think like God, what do we think about suffering? And it's not just a philosophical question these days, is it? In the middle of a year of a pandemic, suffering is very real. Some people have lost, many people, too many people have lost loved ones and not even been able to share the last moments with those loved ones. And the people in the front lines facing the risk of, am I going to catch the virus? Then am I going to bring it home to my family or my friends? And again, every day it seems like we're doing well and the cases are down, and then this week things change, right? And that's a lot of stress. It's a lot of anxiety. There's other kinds of suffering too. The loss, we're all grieving loss. The other day, a guy came to our house. It was like a house inspection after our renovation. I almost reached out and shook his hand because I didn't know, right? It's like, I can't remember, honestly, the last time I shook somebody's hand. Right? So we're grieving and we're suffering from the loss of human contact. And so we're losing. I mean, we grieve from playing card games, bridge clubs, board games, giving a hug, going to sporting events, going to concerts. All right, so there's all kinds of suffering going on at various levels, and we continue to live with this anxiety. So it's not just a philosophical question. What do I believe about suffering? It's a reality. How do I face it? So I read an article this week that helped me think about suffering. It was written 5 years ago, so long before this pandemic, in the journal Scientific American. And it talks about post-traumatic growth, PTG. Now, probably all of us have heard of post-traumatic stress disorder. which, again, is in the news in Nova Scotia because of the Lionel Desmond inquiry that's going on. But we may be less familiar with post-traumatic growth. This is actually positive growth that comes after going through a traumatic experience in our life. This is positive growth, positive change that can happen even after we have gone through trauma. The writer of the article says post-traumatic growth is when a person experiences positive changes resulting from a major life crisis. By actively searching for good in something terrible, a person can use adversity as a catalyst for advancing to a higher level of psychological function. Post-traumatic growth. So in our passage of Scripture, Jesus has told his closest followers that he will suffer and many things and be killed. The trial, torture, crucifixion, death, burial of Jesus was a traumatic event for his followers. And whether they knew it or not, and whether they would ever call it, they suffered post-traumatic stress. After they saw him die, be buried, and was gone from their sight. They were numb and shock and depression and hopelessness. But their post-traumatic stress turns to amazing post-traumatic growth after Jesus rose from the dead on Easter Sunday. And this is the journey we're on during the season of Lent. So as we try to think how God thinks about suffering, let's try and apply the trauma of Jesus' suffering to our own trauma and suffering. Let's look for the good that came out of the suffering of Jesus, that we can experience our own post-traumatic growth during Lent and during this pandemic. One of the positive changes that researchers have identified in post-traumatic growth is personal strength. People gain actually personal strength as they process the trauma. And as they share that trauma, as they receive counseling and support from others, they actually realize, I can overcome this. I don't have to stay stuck. I can overcome this. And it actually gives them greater personal strength to overcome challenges, as researchers have found. And this is exactly what happens when we follow Jesus. When we give our life to Jesus. When we ask Jesus to share our life and our sufferings. The suffering of Jesus shows us that God does not cause our suffering, but God shares our suffering and will renew our strength and will renew our personal strength to persevere each day. Does that make it easy? Of course not. But suffering is going to happen. And Jesus actually helps us face it by saying, I knew I was going to suffer, and I went through it for you. Now I am with you in your hard times. A second positive change that comes after trauma that researchers have found is that it strengthens personal relationships. Talking to others about our struggles and suffering is essential, especially with people who share similar experiences. These conversations can produce more empathy and compassion in us who are suffering. And this sounds to me exactly why the church exists. Jesus Christ suffered for the church. He died so believers could gather together and share and bear one another's burden. That's what the church is all about. We can have post-traumatic growth in our life as Christians because we look at the trauma of Jesus and say, I receive that trauma. I embrace that trauma. And I embrace it with others in community so they can help me go through what I'm going through. The third and final way to grow from trauma, according to this research, is by gaining a greater appreciation for life. By facing our suffering and struggles with the help of counseling, support from family, and taking charge of our recovery, we can use our trauma to help us see life in a whole new way. And isn't that exactly what Jesus came to do? I have suffered. I know what it is to suffer, Jesus says. I know what you're going through. Share that with me. Share your life with me. And I will give you a greater life. I will give you a greater appreciation for life. Because you will begin to think like God thinks. You will begin to act like God acts. You will begin to see the world the way God sees the world. You will receive peace from knowing God, but then you will also be able to transmit peace and comfort and assurance to others so that they can be comforted in their struggles as well. I don't present this as if it's some quick cure. I don't even in any way want to minimize the trauma that people are going through and have gone through. But I do want to say Jesus Christ came into this world to take on our trauma, to share and give his life for us so that we can receive life from him. Learning to think like God leads us to one final question. What do we think is worth saving? Now, obviously I've been fairly intense for the last few minutes, so let me tell you a story about PEI that's a little less intense. What do we think is worth saving? Well, one of the strange things that's happened during the pandemic is people are saving more things. And they're saving and collecting more items. Comic books, antiques, hockey cards, baseball cards. It's like this whole market boom of collecting and saving things. One article I read, there was an estate sale, and they came across this whole savings of pigs, ceramic pigs. The house was full of ceramic pigs. That wasn't on PEI, by the way, but it was in Texas. They even had a ceramic pig standing next to an easel with a little beret on and holding a palette of paint. And that reminded me of this PEI story where there's a story of this woman who saved everything. Ring any bells? I don't know. This woman saved everything. Her family didn't know how much she saved until the woman died and they were cleaning out her house. A few days after her funeral, they discovered, tucked away on a shelf up top, in a small box full of string. And on the box was a label clearly marked, "Pieces of string, too short to save." Different people value different things. Different people save different things. But if we want to learn to think like God, one thing we all want to save is our soul, is our very life. Jesus says, and he asks us today, what good is it for someone to gain the whole world yet forfeit their soul? The answer? Not good at all. Or again he says, well, what can anyone give in exchange for their soul? The answer? Nothing. The one gift that will save our soul, that will save our life, that will help us have the strength to face our suffering, to find the strength to persevere and the resilience to go through and support one another, is found in Jesus Christ, the risen Jesus who suffered but rose again. There are people who just a month ago, was it? 2 months ago, in the middle of a pandemic, someone dropped almost $1.3 million for the rookie card of hockey player Wayne Gretzky. $1.3 million to save a hockey card. What will we do to save our own life? What will we do to save our own soul? We turn to Jesus. We deny ourselves and say, you know, I don't have all the answers. I don't have the strength. We take up our cross, say, Jesus, I'm willing to follow you and receive your suffering. And we follow Jesus. We follow Jesus. We learn to think like God, because now God will live in us through faith in Jesus Christ. If we hold on to Jesus, if we embrace his suffering on the cross, if we surrender our suffering over to him and trust in him, we will be saved. And that's good news. Amen. our God, to love our neighbor as we love ourselves.